When you're looking at a business class NAS, the first thing that pops into most people's heads is the fear of overpaying for a box that sounds impressive on paper but ends up being a headache in the office. I get that hesitation. You've probably read a handful of spec sheets, watched a couple of glossy videos, and maybe even seen a friend brag about a 10 GB network. What you really need is a clear picture of how the device behaves once you plug it in, how it fits into a typical small office workflow, and whether the price point actually matches the value you'll see day to day. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Buffalo TeraStation 5420DN sits in the middle of the business NAS market. It's a 4-bay desktop unit that ships with two 4 TB NAS-grade drives already configured in RAID 1. So you start out with a mirrored 4 TB of usable space right out of the box. That's a comforting safety net for anyone whose primary worry is data loss. At the same time, the device offers a native 10 GB port, snapshots, and cloud sync options that sound like features aimed at larger enterprises. The question is whether those features translate into practical benefits for a small team or a home office power user, and where the trade-offs lie. Let's start with the setup. You pull the unit out of the box, slot the included drives into the bays. They're already mounted, so it's a matter of sliding them in and power it up. The first thing you notice is the web-based management interface. It's not the sleek, app-centric UI you might see on consumer routers, but it's functional and surprisingly straightforward. Within a few minutes, you can assign the IP address, enable the 10 GB interface, and create your first shared folder. Because the drives arrive in RAID 1, the system automatically builds the mirror, which takes about an hour for the initial sync. That delay is something to plan for, but it's a one-time cost that gives you immediate redundancy without having to buy an extra drive separately. From a daily usability standpoint, the 10 GB port is the headline feature. In a typical small office with a gigabit switch, you can still plug the NAS into a regular 1 GB port, and it will fall back gracefully, but you won't see the speed boost. The real advantage appears when you have a 10 GB-enabled switch or a direct attach cable to a workstation that needs to move large files quickly. Think video editors, CAD engineers, or anyone handling multi-gigabyte datasets. In those scenarios, copying a 20 GB project file can drop from a minute on a 1 GB network to under 20 seconds. If your environment already has that network infrastructure, the NAS unlocks its fastest transfer path without any extra configuration. Snapshots are another feature that deserves a practical look. Buffalo markets them as instant data backup and recovery. What that means in practice is you can schedule point-in-time snapshots of your shared folders, and if a user accidentally deletes a file or a piece of software corrupts a dataset, you can roll back to the previous snapshot with a few clicks. The snapshots are stored on the same drives, so you're not adding external backup media, but you are allocating part of the 4 TB usable space for version history. For a team that frequently iterates on documents or media files, that can be a lifesaver. You get a safety net without needing a separate backup server. The downside is that the more frequent your snapshots, the less actual storage you have for new data, so you'll need to monitor the usage and prune older snapshots manually if you start to run low. Cloud integration is baked into the firmware, supporting Dropbox, Amazon S3, Microsoft Azure, and OneDrive. The workflow here is fairly simple. You point the NAS at your cloud bucket, and it will sync selected folders. For businesses that already rely on a cloud backup strategy, this can serve as a hybrid approach, local fast access for day-to-day work, with an off-site copy for disaster recovery. The catch is that the sync process isn't instantaneous. Large files will take time to upload over your internet connection, and the NAS doesn't offer granular bandwidth throttling. If you have a limited upload pipe, you might see a slowdown during peak sync windows, so scheduling the sync for off hours can mitigate that. Now, who should actually consider buying the TeraStation 5420DN? If you run a small office of 515 people, need reliable file sharing, and already have or plan to invest in a 10 GB network, this NAS gives you a solid, turnkey solution. The included drives mean you avoid the extra step of sourcing compatible HDDs, and the mirrored RAID protects against a single drive failure, a common pain point for businesses that can't afford downtime. The snapshot and cloud features add layers of data protection that go beyond just mirroring, which is valuable for teams that can't afford a separate backup appliance. Also, if you work with large media files, video editing, 3D rendering, GIS data, the 10 GB speed will actually be felt in your workflow. Conversely, there are clear scenarios where you'd be better off looking elsewhere.